My name is Tim. So my background is in architecture and urban design. So I would like to talk a little bit about what I've been doing the last 10 years. So before that, I was working as an architect and urban designers in different countries. But now we kind of go beyond a little bit of that. There it is. So of course, like as you say, you saw the corbeau, right? So that's the whole the kind of principles of that defines the modern architecture and urban design, which is like form follow functions. Yeah. Right? At least that's what they claim, right? But the focus was in the form, right? So, but we would like to ask them, well, if that's the case, as we know that the social conditions and also technology changes, then what functions follows, right? What does functions follows? So in that case, what we've been trying to do right now is actually thinking about that actually functions follows activities and systems. So although the systems actually, activity may not change. So for example, if I wanted to write something to Pawani, so I might write a letter, but instead of writing on paper, so I'll be sending an email, right, or in text, so that actually the system changes, right? So then this is kind of the way that we start to think about this. So in a kind of more conventional way, that at least from school or like the kind of Bauhaus types of training is that we start from hard infrastructure to soft infrastructures, right? So we start thinking about the buildings first. We talk about the building forms of the city first, and then we think about, of course, like the spatial programming of it, and then later on, then somebody else is going to be like operating it. Right, so for like when I was working as architects and urban designers, actually we proposed the program, but we never run the program, right? So, and this is what the part that we would like to give it a try is that instead of just thinking about design build, our business also including operation. But in a way, if you think about that, actually the operations, if this becomes a cycle, that the operations kind of feedbacks into the design decisions. So meaning that in a way that we don't have to always think from the hard infrastructure perspective. So before that, I was actually working in China and other places for quite some time during the early 2000s. And at the time, basically a lot of the so-called local revitalizations or urban developments is that actually the mentality was that built in that they will come. Obviously, that's no longer the case, especially in the case that with the aging societies that is sweeping across different Asia cities, and also as Professor Fukuda mentioned, actually a lot of the areas is actually have a population decrease. So it's no longer just assuming that building the hard infrastructure is the first step. Yeah. So, and this is actually how we started to think about actually Fab Cafe as a global network. So I'm not a barista by training, but actually this is like the idea of a Fab Cafe is more like an open innovation platform in a way that is, if you think about like a cafe as a typology, actually even from the Cafe Greco in Italy, right? So it's an idea as an area where people can exchange the idea. But actually with the kind of democratization of like prototyping machineries like 3D printers or laser cutters that actually getting more and more cheaper for everybody to use. Actually, so instead of just writing ideas and then passing it and looking at it on the screen, you can actually touch it and feel it. So in a way, when we think about the Fab Cafe Global Network, we were thinking about almost like using laser cutter or 3D printer as almost like fax machines. So if I have an idea that is generated from in Tokyo, then actually that idea can pass on to Taiwan and Korea and also kind of make the idea all the way around, but with different types of contexts, right? How people are dealing with textures and maybe favorites of taste, like all of these things, or fermentation, right? Each country has these types of culture, but every culture has a different take on the same subject. So, and then this is actually how we do this. And also the other thing is that a lot of the things that we were doing, that we were interested in doing, initially there's no client. Like nobody will pay for it. Like for example, we think that haptic design is actually very important. Like haptic design is actually thinking about design not just from a visual perspective, but also how do you tap into the touch sensor side, which is for mobility, actually is actually very important, because actually the best way to, let's say, to experience a Google map may not be looking at your map while you're driving, but actually from a haptic perspective, right? So things like that is, from the very beginning, there's no client that are willing to take on because it's too risky. They don't know where to go. But at the same time, this is actually the way that we use this open platform to initiate these projects. And then gradually, the clients or the governments actually join like on a lateral level rather than a top-down level. Yeah. So, and the whole Fab Cafe idea started from, actually it's born out as a spin-off from Fab Lab. So Fab Lab is more horizontal in a way that is really thinking about like spreading out all these tools for educations. And then we talked with Professor Neil Gershenfeld from MIT, who started the Fab Lab, and also Tanaka Sensei from the Fab Lab in Japan. And then we have a very clear mission in terms of Fab Cafe. Fab Cafe is more for the verticals, meaning that to kind of go beyond the hobbyists types of mentality in a way that to how can we connect to businesses, to really trying to push for innovation from a more bottom-up way. So, and the first Fab Cafe started in Tokyo in 2021, and now that was a similar time that I came back from Asia, bringing some of the ideas of having these types of design collectives from San Francisco back to Asia, and then I saw Fab Cafe, and so at that time I pitched to the owner of Fab Cafe Tokyo, well, let's try to build a global network. So, and that's how we get started. So the second Fab Cafe after Tokyo was actually in Taiwan, and the next one was in Barcelona and Bangkok and other places. So now that we have about 14 locations around the world, but from a very organic perspective of like joining people that are willing to do something like this. Actually, and this is also some of the things that we're trying to think about this as a bottom-up, almost a bottom-up franchise model in a way that, because for a creator or designer from Mexico, it's actually very hard to get the exposures in the middle of Shibuya, right? But actually using these connections, actually, this is actually what we're trying to do. Yeah. So, and from that point on, we kind of never stopped. So from Fab Cafe, and then we started to have other types of more focuses. So the other one is called Material, actually, which is focusing on how do you think about how to combine traditional craft with new technologies. And then there's layout, and then like bio clubs and different things. And then there are two cases I do wanted to cover. I hope that I'll have enough time. So one of them is actually about in Hida, in Furukawa, in Japan. So this is actually a project I want to talk about, because in a way that is actually goes beyond the traditional practice, in a way that is like the architects or urban designer is no longer just a consultant to think about, okay, what they should do. It's not like an expert going into and then trying to advise them what they should do inside the city. But in a way, actually, this is a PPP. So it's a public-private partnership in a way that we co-invested with three parties. So this is with the Hida city government and Tobimushi, and also Loftwork. And actually, PPP in Japan, I think Professor Fukuda would know that actually there's a lot of taboo. There's a really bad name with PPP, as you know, because like previously, this is the way that actually the government subsidized heavy industries, like kind of the zombie company that would never make a profit, right? But in a way, this is kind of a different way, because actually the investment is quite low. And then just skip to the end results. Like after the first 3 years, actually the company and the new company turned black, and then Loftwork buy back the shares from the government partially. So in a way that actually that becomes a good case studies for the local government. And actually there was a little bit of, obviously, the local politics, because the people that sign off, like the mayor that signed off on this project, he was 96 years old. And then after the first year, he retired, and then there's a new mayor that joins. But in a way, because of this buyback, like this becomes a best practice case. And this is where I felt it was kind of inspiring, because obviously I'm a foreigner on this case, and then I was thinking about how we can help in terms of leveraging this kind of global network for a place in Hida Furukawa. So, so what we were trying to do, like the mission of this is actually because like so in Hida there's like 3 industries, right? So the beef industries, right? Like the cattle. Actually, we don't have to worry about that. They're doing really well. But then there's also the wood craftsmanships and also the forestry management. So there's actually quite a lot of abandoned forest, not just in Hida, but also all over Japan. Yeah, so this is one of the cases of how do we increase the value of the tree. So not just for lumber, but also the forest. So this is one of the main missions, yeah, for that. And I was quite inspired by this because there's rarely any country that has this super long visions of what to do with the place. Yeah, so I was trying to help from a kind of foreigner perspective in a way. So Hida is kind of in the middle of Japan. So it's right in the middle of Japan right there. And then this is kind of like the value chain. So there's the forest, the processing, and then the lumber mill. And then also there's places for making furniture and also making products and space designs. Yeah. So one of the key things is that how we are thinking about how we can actually bring in technologies in a way not just to think about as a product, but actually as a way to introduce designers and engineers into rethinking about the entire value chain. Because as a way, if you think about this, when a tree is cut down, 40% of the materials are going into bio-waste. It's basically burning, right? But if we can actually 3D scan the entire, actually there's efforts to digitize the entire forest, to identify areas, and also thinking about strategic areas to thin out the forest. So in a way that to increase biodiversity, but also the other thing is actually 3D scan the raw materials, the bent wood, so in a way that we can actually maximize the utility of those woods. Yeah, so this is one of the efforts. Actually, this is one of the ways to think about, because there's a lot of bent woods in those areas, the broadleaf trees, but in a way we try to maximize the usage of the single piece of lumber in terms, and then thinking about this how to apply to the entire building. Yeah, so, and not just that, so in a way, instead of thinking about like these kinds of design camp going to Osaka or Tokyo, we actually bring designers. So we collaborate with some of our friends that was teaching in University of Toronto, Hong Kong University, University in Taiwan, and in US. To go in, like, so we had a smart craft studio. So, but in a way, this is not just for architecture students, but actually for different types of cross-disciplinary design students to go in as a really intense 3 weeks programs. So in a way that, and then the subject matter is actually, they have to think about the outcome is actually for the local audience. Like the average age of Hida Furukawa, I think it's about 73. That's the average age of the citizen over there. And then so that's where we were trying to do the research, but also during those times, the students learn about the kumiki, like the Japanese wood journeys, which is actually very fascinating for most of the people that are studying architecture and also product design. But also the other thing is actually talking, also this is one of the professors from Parsons, we also think about warm tech. So meaning that how do we introduce technologies into these types of traditional craft? Yeah, so we were working with professors from Yamas, from Gifu, and also from professors from Parsons from New York on this types of projects. So this was 2012. 2017, we were still using IBM Watsons. So for doing something like this. And then some of these key results and the products. So I'll skip very quickly. So these are actually after 3 weeks. It was pretty intensive that they were doing like this kind of intelligent analog map, like as an interactive map to showcase where are the places to go within the town. Also, there's like actually a kind of a smart food shrine. So if you shake on it, that actually gives you some recommendations on where you want to go in terms of location-wise. Yeah, and then also using some of these wasted wood for actually inspired by a local flower arrangement sensei in there to think about how people would be interacting without intruding. Yeah, so these are types of ideas, and then we have been trying and also working with a university in Taiwan to think about the ESG reports, because our team in Hirokuma was just focusing on like working, but there's also the kind of like, okay, what are the results? What are the kind of credits? Like what is the quantitative? So they were looking into, after about 7 years of developing this, looking into like the stakeholder maps of this, but also into calculating what types of carbon savings for a small building that is probably 1/3 of the size of this building, right? This hall, yeah. So, and also the other thing is that, so this is not just an education. Education is only the first way to introduce, to get to people to know more, to get more interest into a place like Hida Furukawa. Also, the other thing is that we started to work with architects and also thinking about how to think about like these types of wasted material. Most of the material that used to be thrown away, but in a way that actually can be also part of the structure, and thinking about the types of usage for this. And also, like, so it's not just architecture, but also like materials for furnitures. So these are like foraging in the forest, but in a way that you can actually turn it into a nice piece of furniture as well. And even going even finer grain of just picking up the scraps, and then actually working with one of the team that are studying from London to come and pick those materials up in the scrap yards and turn those into crayons. And then now it's actually turned into products. Yeah. So this is the first case. Hopefully I have time to cover the other one. How much time do I get? 2 more minutes. Okay, very quickly. So the other case that we were doing was also looking into, this is more like a work in progress case. We're talking about immersive tech and also creative tech economy. So we did a study for UNESCO for Southeast Asia in terms of how to think about the leapfrogging for creative economies. So these are the kind of the key drivers. I won't go into the details, but actually these are types of things, especially thinking about the idea of AR, XR, like, which is upcoming in the next couple of years, and with AI and also a multi-user perspective. So, and then the kind of stakeholder map in terms of what are the key players to actually make this work, in terms of how do you create the infrastructures and the policies for doing something like this. And then also the other thing, that is also the trend of also when we're thinking about mobilities, actually one of the key things that why we're doing this is that when we talk about soft infrastructure in an urban perspective, is that we're thinking about the so-called dynamic system. So now if we think about an urban system, it's no longer just a top-down system, but actually how do we fulfill kind of a real-time demand. So in a way that the overall system can accommodate that. So, and this put into play in terms of what types of technologies is in our pocket. So like right now we're in a kind of the verge of these types of devices. So it's not just about the AR glasses, but it's actually about physical computing. So actually this is this hasn't been come out yet, but this is the prototype from Meta in terms of the Orion AR glasses. So this is the part that actually the feedback is actually from the hand. So in a way, the gesture will be able to feedback into like what you're seeing in the hand. And then these are the types of things that we also looking forwards in terms of planning ahead, in terms of what are the types of things that we can do. So these are the types of things that we are trying to give to the hands of the future of the designer, is actually building these types of XR framework in a way that, so this is a plug and play, so that without coding, we can teach designers how we can deal with the digital layers and also the physical layers of this. And also creating these types of tools of visualizing the urban cities with a kind of dynamic inputs. So in a multi-user environment. So this will be very helpful 15 years ago when we were doing like kind of public engagement in San Francisco when we're trying to deal with urban developments, like to put in. So in a way, this is actually, so it's not just wearing the AR glasses, but people with an app can actually put comments into this 3D models. Yeah. So you can do the commenting and also, yeah. I'll skip. And then if by any chance that you guys are in Japan at the end of June, like please go check out like this exhibition, which is quite interesting in a way that we're trying to look into. We'll present a new project that was working with Denso to actually thinking about how to digitize some of these craftsmanships but in an irregular way. So it's not just repeating it from robots, but actually predicting some of the irregular patterns.